Hello everyone, this is Dante Raids with another Raid Shadow Legends video. On this video we're gonna check the rares on Raid Shadow Legends, what is worth keeping from every faction. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Starting from the top, Bannerlords are actually one of the worst factions when it comes to rares. It doesn't really have a must build champion, but if we must look at some, one of the best in this faction is Valerie, with her A2 that increases the duration of all buffs on all allies by 1 turn, also decreases the duration of all debuffs on all allies by 1 turn, and also places a 25% increased attack on all allies for 2 turns. This is a very nice skill. She also places shield with her A3, so if you don't have another option, especially in the beginning, you can really use her maybe up to level 50. I don't think she actually worth building to level 60, except you need her in some secret room or in Curse City. Another champion that could be used is Dagger, because she has the big version of decreased defense on all enemies, although she doesn't have 100% chance to place it, but the good part is that she is void and she doesn't weak hit. And lastly, Spymaster could also be used because of his block buffs on the enemies, although again it is not a 100% chance, even booked. And he also has a provoke on 2 enemies, which could be helpful to crowd control. Now on the High Elves. High Elves is one of the best functions when it comes to rares. The best for me is Reliquary Tender. She has a revive on her A3. She revives an ally with 30% HP and 30% turn meter. She has a great skill on her A2. She removes all debuffs from all allies, then places a continuous heal buff on them for 2 turns. This is very powerful, especially in the early game, although many times you can use her in the end game as well, in PvE of course, in Spider in the Doom Tower. And on her A1 she places the small version of decreased attack. This is a very good champion even now. Apothecary is still one of the best rare champions in the game. He is the speed master. He places with his A3 a 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns, and also fills the turn meter by 15%. He has an amazing heal on his A2 that can be critical, so he can basically fully heal an ally, and he attacks 3 times at random with his A1, so he's very helpful on the Fire Knight. Of course, this faction has many good rares, like Elaine. She's a starter champion. She has 2 AoE attacks, very powerful, so she can be used very well in PvE and PvP especially. Ares is also an amazing rare champion. She is used even in endgame clan boss teams, because she removes 1 random debuff from all allies, and she places a 30% increased speed on all allies for 2 turns. These help us speedrun many great clan boss teams. Selenia is also a very good champion. She's a void champion, a rare champion, and can place and increase the duration of HP burn, so it is very powerful. Prosecutor is also a very strong champion. She has a 2-hitter on her A1, an AoE on her A2, and a 3-hitter on her A3. Decrease the turn meter on her A1, decrease speed with AoE on her A2, and with her 3-hitter on her A3, she can place a heal reduction on the enemy, so she is very strong for the Fire Knight. On the Sacred Order, we have a lot of rare champions, but we don't really have good champions. Ethel is very good as a starter champion and one of my favorites to be fair. She has a 3-hitter on her A1 that places a weaken. She's very strong for Fire Knight. She can place increased attack on herself, and she has a very strong AoE attack. She's a good damage dealer as a rare. A special champion that you can use from Sacred Order is Templar. Because of his A2, he attacks 4 times at random. Each hit has a chance of placing a provoke on the enemy, and places a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn. Damage inflicted is proportional to defense. This is a very good skill, and you can actually split unit and solo Bomberf with it. Another champion you could potentially use is Draconis, because he places a shield buff on all allies equal to 15% of this champion max HP for 2 turns, and this is a 3-turn skill, so he can actually help you keep your team alive quite easily. So if you don't have another champion to help you, he can be your protector. On the Barbarians we do have some special champions. One of the best is War Maiden, a farmable champion, but the best part about her is that she attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance when booked of placing the big version of decreased defense on enemies for 2 turns. This is a very powerful skill and helps you get through PvE content much easier. Marked can actually be used because of her A3. She places a block debuffs on all allies for 1 turn, and the big version 60% increased defense on all allies for 2 turns. This is a very good skill, can be used either in clan boss or on PvE and in PvE in general. Another great champion that you will be using, especially in secret rooms and in Kerch City, is Sylvan Watchers. Because of her AoE A1, her very strong A2, she attacks 1 enemy, has an additional 25% chance of inflicting a critical hit, will ignore 75% of the target's defense. This can be hit very hard, but her A3 is actually much better. She attacks 1 enemy, has an additional 25% chance of inflicting a critical hit, and has a 100% chance of fully depleting the target's turn meter. So you can actually use her in every boss that can have their turn meter reduced, like Spider for example. She's a great champion, and many endgame accounts actually have 2 or 3 of them fully built. Of course, for an early game account, you don't really have to build multiple copies of her. And another champion that is used especially in Kerch City is Sentinel. He has a provoke on his A1, decreased attack and heal reduction on his A2 on all enemies, and a passive that helps him stay alive. In Ogryn Tribes, the only rare champion I would suggest anyone to build is Bellower. He's a very strong rare champion, one of the best, because he has 3 skills, all AoE skills. So if you use him with a stun set, he will do amazing job. On his A1 he can place a block active skills, which is an amazing skill, especially in the beginning in Doom Tower or Kerch City. I could use only his A1 to try and block active skills on the enemies, so I have a better chance of surviving and moving past the stages. On his A2 he attacks all enemies and places a decreased speed on the enemies, and on his A3 he puts the small version of decreased attack and decreased defense. No other rare champion is actually worth building, at least on a high level. You could use some of them up to level 50 for example, like Gear Grounder, that he revives the dead ally with 50% HP and 50% turn meter, and heals all allies by 15% of their max HP. He's an okay healer and a reviver, not that great, but in the beginning he can be of some help, of course. Lizarmen, again we don't have too many great rare champions, but we do have some special champions for niche cases, like Max Stalker. He has his A2, attacks on enemy, places a sleep debuff for 2 turns, and this is on 2 turn cooldown. So he is one of the best champions for the Sun Devil. Metal Saber, he's very good in Scarabos. Because of his A2, he places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns. The value of shield is proportional to this champion level. We don't know what this means, but he can put a shield on all allies for 2 turns on a 2 turn cooldown. So he's very useful on Scarabos, where you really need the shield on your team. These 2 champions, if you don't have another way to pass the bosses, they are actually very worth it to build them. Another champion that could be used is Terix, one of the newest rare champions. His best skill is his A2, where he places a provoke debuff on all allies, on all enemies for 1 turn. His A3, he places the small version of Strengthen on all allies for 2 turns and places a counter attack buff on this champion for 2 turns. He also attacks on enemy with his A1 and places a 25% increased accuracy on this champion for 2 turns. So if you are lacking crowd control, he can actually be a good champion in early game. And for newer accounts, of course, Haruspex can actually be used. He has a revive on his A3 and a 10 meter boost and increased speed on his A3, on his A2. Although his 10 meter boost is actually worse than Apothecary, because he puts the small version of increased speed on your ally. In Skinwalkers, the only champion I would suggest you could build is Narhorn. He's very strong in faction wars, in secret rooms in Kerth City. His signature skill is his A2, places a provoke debuff on all enemies for 1 turn, places a 30% increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns, on 3 turns cooldown. This is very strong because he places the provoke, he doesn't hit, so affinity doesn't matter. With his A3, he places an unkillable buff on this champion for 2 turns, on a 3 turn cooldown, so he helps you keep him alive quite well. No other champion here is that great. Orcs, again, is one of the worst factions when it comes to rares. They are all mediocre to trash. I wouldn't actually suggest to build any of them, maybe just up to 50 Galek as a DPS, and maybe Ironclad because of his passive. When healed, will attack all enemies inflicting damage proportional to any surplus heal. Damage inflicted is equal to 50% of any surplus heal. He can actually hit very hard with this skill if built correctly, and you have another champion that can actually heal him so much that he does great damage. And also this passive works with stun set, for example, so you can heal him a surplus heal with another champion and hit the enemies and stun them when he doesn't actually take a turn. He's by no means a must build, but he's a fun champion and can actually be used in faction wars. In Demonspawns, we actually have some nice rare champions. One of my favorites is Diabolist, especially in early game. I also showed it in my free-to-play in the Hell Hades challenge. I used her in live arena all the time as a 10 meter booster, because on her A3 she fills the 10 meter of all allies by 15% and also decreases the 10 meter of all allies by 15%. So if you have some nice accuracy on her and have her fast, she's very useful and very strong in arena. The bad thing about her is that she's not very strong in all areas of the game, like Apothecary for example, so she's definitely not a must build, but she doesn't actually need to be built to level 60. She can do a very good job at level 40 or level 50. Petrifia is a very strong rare champion. On her A1 she puts decreased defense on the enemy. On her A2 she can place decreased attack and poison. And on her A3 and poison sensitivity and poisons again. And has an increased accuracy aura in all battles by 30. So she's actually very strong, feels like she's a better version of Frozen Banshee. Marquez is one of the best damage dealers when it comes to rares, especially with her A2, because if the enemies have weaken on them, she double hits with this skill, and she actually hits really hard. Abyssal is a champion that can be used pretty well, especially in early game. On her A1 he attacks all enemies and has a chance to place block buffs on all enemies for 2 turns. On his A2 he heals all allies by 50% of their max HP, and on his A3 places an increased defense and increased attack on all allies for 2 turns. Small version, but he places both buffs, so he's very strong just with that. There are very few champions that they actually can do this. Now on the Undead. Here we also have some nice champions. Frozen Banshee is one of my favorites because on her A3 she puts poison sensitivity on the enemy, and with her A1 she puts 2 poisons on the enemy if they have poison sensitivity. This is very strong, especially for bosses, and especially if you have an ally attack or counter attack champion on your team. So she can use her A1 multiple times. With a counter attack team or ally attack team on the Demon Lord, she can actually fill all the debuff bar with poisons just by herself. For faction or Scarce City or secret rooms in Doom Tower, you could actually use Greener as a reviver. And also Banshee, because on her A1 is a AoE attack, she puts the small version of decreased defense, but if you use her in a Stunset, she's actually very strong. In early game you could actually use Stitched Beast as well. I used him in early game Fire Knight and Spider because of his A3, because of the 100% turn meter decrease. In Dark Elves we have some of the best rares in the game. Coldheart is actually the best rare in the game in my opinion. I still use her in my endgame account in some bosses, and that's all because of her A3. Heartseeker is one of the best abilities in the game. She attacks on enemy, has a 30% extra critical rate. She decreases the target's turn meter by 100%, and it is an enemy max HP attack, so she hits actually pretty hard. She also has a 4-hitter on her A1, so she is quite strong in Fire Knight with her A1 and her A3. An amazing champion is Paragon because of his A2. He places an unkillable buff on himself for 2 turns on a 2-turn cooldown, so he can actually stay unkillable all the time on the battle. And I actually use him in my free-to-play account that I used in the Hell Hades challenge, so I can beat some bosses like Bommel and the Scarab King. Painkeeper again. She is one of the best rare champions because she is used in some of the best Demon Lord clan boss teams. And that's because of her A3, because she decreases the cooldown of all ally skills by 1 turn. In Dark Elves, of course, we have Gale, arguably the best starter champion, although I don't really like him that much. That is a personal choice. Objectively, he's an amazing rare champion, very good DPS, and he has poisons, so you can use him in Demon Lord and other bosses very effectively. In Knight's Revenant, let's see what we have. Again, Renegade is an amazing champion for PvE, and that's because of her A3. She decreases the cooldown of all ally skills by 2 turns, so you can reset the cooldown of your team, so you can use your skills again and again. Executioner is also a very strong champion. With his A2 he attacks all enemies, decreases the turn meter by 20%, and has a chance to place a decreased speed on them. With his A3 he places an increased defense and a counter attack on him, so he can actually use his A1 many times, where he places a stun on the enemies. He's very useful in secret rooms and in Curse City. In Dwarves, we have a lot of rare champions, but only a few of them are actually useful. Let's start with Avir. Avir the Alchemage is a very nice champion, especially for faction wars, for example, and early game. He has a 10 meter boost and healing on his A3, a decreased attack and decreased speed on his A2, and a poison debuff on his A1. He can actually be very effective and in many areas of the game. Master Butcher is a very nice champion because of his first passive. When attacked, heals all allies equal to the amount of the damage taken. It says that it does not work against bosses, but the bombs that Bommel has in Doom Tower are not classified as bosses, but are the minions. So this passive actually works and helps us stay alive quite well. And also has another passive that when he dies, he revives another dead ally and fully heals him. Bulwark is another good champion. I used him a lot in my early game in Raid Shadow Legends, especially for his A3, his passive, sorry. When attacked, has a 30% chance of extending the duration of all debuffs on the attacker by 1 turn. So I used him in Demon Lord, so when I had debuffs on the boss, when attacked, the duration of the debuffs were increased. So I did more damage with poisons, and all the debuffs like weaken, burn, decreased defense were staying on the boss for longer. He has a HP burn on his A2 and the small version of weaken on his A1. And also he's a defense based champion, so he's actually much easier to keep him alive, and has a nice defense aura in all battles. Painsmith is another good DPS champion. He's one of the very few, if any, rare champions that can actually block revive when killing an enemy. And Dilgol is actually another good champion because of his decreased defense on his A3, although 4 turn cooldown, decreased accuracy on his A2, and decreased speed on his A1. He's very strong, especially in the early game. In Shadowkin we don't have that many good rare champions. Only Assassin could actually be used somehow in Demon Lord, for example, because of his poison, increasing the duration of all debuffs on the enemy by 1 turn, and the weaken on his A3. Many of these champions can be used in faction wars, in early game when you have a very new account, but they are not something special. In Sylvan Watchers we actually have a lot of great champions. For example, Pathfinder Kate is one of the few rare champions that can attack all enemies, has a chance of increasing the cooldown of a random skill on each target by 2 turns. So this can be actually very helpful in wave content. Flenan again is a very strong rare champion. On his A1 he places a stun. On his A2 he attacks all enemies and places a decreased speed. And on his A3 he places an increased accuracy buff on all allies, then teams up with a random ally to attack a target enemy. And on his passive, he has a 50% chance of granting an extra turn when this champion places a decreased speed buff, debuff, on 3 or more enemies with their Saturn E skill. His A2 basically. This skill has a 100% chance to place a decreased speed when booked. So if you don't weak hit, you have a 50% chance of getting an extra turn. So you can actually go from an AoE to an ally attack. And finally, one of the best rare champions, 3 Silk Note. On his A3, revives 2 random allies with 25% HP and 25% turn meter. Also places a shield buff on all revived allies for 2 turns. On his A2 he heals all allies and places an increased defense buff on all allies again. On his A1 he places a decreased attack on the enemy. And also has a very nice speed aura for the function crypts. He is very strong in all areas of the game, no matter that the speed aura is not in all battles. So that's it for the rares I personally believe are worth building at least to 50 and some definitely to 60, like Gold Heart for example. A couple of years ago you could use rares a lot more effectively, but with all the power creep in this game, with mythicals and empowerments and all, it's actually getting a lot harder to make rares usable after mid-game. So an advice from me is to really be careful and don't get rares to 60 except it is absolutely necessary. Or if of course it is Cold Heart, because Cold Heart is one of the best champions and you could actually use a couple of her even in endgame. So do not 60 rares except it is actually really necessary, because resources are really hard to come by, especially in free-to-play and early game accounts. So that's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Until next time, take care.